Good afternoon, everyone. So, today we're going to talk about shipping a Mac Catalyst app. But wait, wasn't it called MARZIPAN just a year ago? What about UIKIT for Mac? And why would anyone even care now that we have SwiftUI? So welcome to my talk about Catalyst, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'm actually curious, because Catalyst is now out for around 2 months. I would like to see some hands. Who played with Catalyst so far? OK, for like 10 people. Who works on an actual Catalyst app? 1. Who's planning to port their iOS app to the Mac eventually? OK, great. So this talk is for everyone, as you see. Now, you might wonder, why do I care so much about Catalyst? So I'm Peter Steinberger, StyPete on Twitter, from Vienna, Austria. I did create this company called PSPDFKit 10 years ago. We make PDF libraries for iOS, Android, Windows, web, and even macOS. And 2 years ago, we also created an app with the very creative name PDF Viewer. Guess what it does? And our users love it, but there were 2 feature requests that they always cried for. Number 1 was split screen, and we could finally ship that with iOS 13. And the second one was, please make a Mac app. Now, you might understand why Catalyst is interesting. But wait, didn't I say we already have a Mac SDK? Couldn't we just use that one? So I left out a small detail. We do ship a Mac SDK, but we only ship the model layer and a small APPKIT app to show the API. And you know, code sharing between iOS and macOS is actually kind of easy. You have UI color and NS color, but over the years, Apple worked pretty hard to unify those. So the difference is actually very thin, and you can get away with a few defines or the equivalent in Swift and a few extra methods. However, once it gets to the UI, things become a little bit more difficult. The Mac has a different idea about UI. You know, there's a mouse or a trackpad. You have freely resizable windows. You have a touch bar. And we already got 1-star reviews because we don't support the touch bar. And while Apple is working hard to make those differences smaller, you know, they ship drag and drop in iOS 11. We got much, much better Windows support in iOS 13. There's still quite a gap. And Catalyst is this promise that it translates everything from UIKit to the Mac automatically. The promise is that it's just a checkbox, and things will work. And if you worked on Apple platforms for a while, you know this isn't quite the end game. This is just the start. And one important thing you have to know right away, if you have things that are deprecated, like UI WebView, these things will simply be missing on Catalyst. But if you take good care, if you work on your deprecations, if you have no warnings, then checking the checkbox will actually get you very far. And if you have some time, maybe not tonight, but in the next few days, try it, and you'll be surprised. Now you can see how Catalyst is an attractive target for our company. We have a large, well-maintained code base, a very complex UI, and it would take probably years to create something similar with AppKit. So checking the checkbox is much, much more attractive. In fact, it was so interesting to me that already a year ago, I tried it and gave a talk about hacking Marzipan. This is a screenshot from a talk I gave at Try Swift in New York. And it was hilarious because the first thing somebody did was they ported React Native for iOS via Marzipan to the Mac. And then the comment was, somebody asked, is it good? And they're like, yeah, it's reasonably good. But there was no checkbox yet. The best hack was actually a hack from Susan Smith, that's called MARZIPANIFY, that brought in a lot of little scripts that tricked your app into being a Mac app. But you had to do a lot more. It was not a good experience, and you couldn't share apps because you had to disable security on your Mac. Now, a year later, we got the production version of Catalyst. I guess everybody already updated to Catalyst. But then again, Apple also barely spent any time talking about it. The focus was SwiftUI. So you wonder, is it even smart to to bet on Catalyst. Even the name was a last-minute change, right? It was called MARZIPAN, then they called it UIKIT for Mac. Even the little bit of documentation that actually was there was called UIKIT for Mac, and then they changed it a few times, and now it's Catalyst. Combined with Catalina, actually quite a little bit confusing, but that's what it is. I made a small table to guide you a little bit for what technology makes the most sense. Now, obviously, if neither time or money is a factor, you will have the best results by using native frameworks. You use UIKIT for iOS, you use APPKIT for the Mac. However, we don't have enough time for everything, right? We all work under constraints. So if you already have a Mac app, it's completely fine to stick with APPKIT. It will not go away. If you have an iOS app and you want to move it to the Mac, Catalyst is a very interesting option. Then again, if you start from scratch, you might actually consider SwiftUI. And if you have a very strong web presence, don't hate me, it's fair to consider Electron. Now, if we like movie references or TV show references, SwiftUI is a little bit like Baby Yoda. It's more powerful than you think, but it still needs to grow up a little bit. Catalyst, on the other hand, it pretends to be this young thing, but it's actually something kind of old, bolted on something very old. Remember, UIKIT has been around for over 10 years, and APPKIT evolved from Next Step. And I mean, this is what NS stands for. And the first release of Next Step was in 1989. And yeah, another downside is you need Catalina, which has its own problems. And here's a little bit of an overview about Apple's release cycle. You know, they are on a yearly schedule for quite a while. And there's also no indication that this might change. And it's also not a problem on iOS, because adoption is very fast. iOS 12 was released in September, and 4 months later, it already had 80% adoption rate. And iOS 13 is very similar. It also got released at the end of September, and now we are already at 72% adoption rate. So it looks like adoption rate actually will be very similar, even though Apple dropped a few devices. macOS, on the other hand. First of all, it was actually tricky to find statistics. There's much less available. And Catalina was released on October 7. So roughly 2 months in, we are at 27% adoption rate, which is not great. Updating is more risky. Apps will break, especially anything that's 32-bit will just not work anymore. And other apps might also need updates. So people are, of course, more hesitant to do the jump. And of course, you can also always use Electron, which still works with macOS 10.10, which is the equivalent of iOS 8. So to summarize it, adoption rate is not great, but it's also not terrible. Yeah, some people get the meme. So our launch was a little bit rushed. The Catalina release was a little bit earlier than we thought, but we made it on time, and we actually got rewarded with a feature. But let's go a little bit back. What is a good Mac app? What makes a good Mac app? We tend to forget what AppKit actually gives us. And if you haven't worked with AppKit, you might not know. So let's do a very quick review what's in there. You have buttons, and you have so many different buttons variations. All the screenshots, by the way, are from Martin Pilkington. He has a blog post series that's called Appreciating AppKit, and there's a lot more information. You find the link in my slides, and I share them at the end of my talk. So we have all those different text inputs. We have all those different sliders. I mean, this is fairly easy to reproduce in UIKIT, but still, this is all stock functionality that you get from AppKit out of the box. You have a date picker. You have a table. You have an outline. And to be fair, you have these amazing controls, but then the equivalent of the table view and the collection view in AppKit are by far not as powerful. So everything has ups and downs. You have a rule editor. You have a grid view. There's a lot of things that are in AppKit that you will eventually miss when you make a Mac app. And then we also need to talk about the most problematic limitation of Catalyst, which is Basically, this app is your canvas, and when you create a popover, it will stay in your canvas. There's no easy way to simply make the popover extend the existing window, which is not great. Let's hope that Apple does something for that next year. Currently, it's very difficult to work around that. Now, this also brings us to a few design considerations. So as you've seen, popovers are generally not great and feel a little bit alien. So instead of popovers, try to use sidebars. Instead of pushing your whole view with navigation controllers, try different animations. Try a fade or maybe no animation. The push really feels very weird on the Mac. And instead of a UI toolbar, definitely adopt NS toolbar. So to give you a little bit of an overview, this is the same code base, and it's actually very little adaptations. But the key things we did here is getting rid of the popover, moving it to a sidebar, and also adopting the proper toolbar and native tabs. And talking about the toolbar, AppKit has quite a sophisticated system and an integrated editor, so you can customize the toolbar as a user. And this logic is really complete. It propagates to multiple windows. It allows you to save configurations. This would be really, really hard and annoying to replicate. So Apple blurred the borders there a little bit and actually is giving us a little bit of AppKit in Catalyst. So if you work on Catalyst, you can actually import some of AppKit, and then you get NS Toolbar, and there even are some UIKIT additions to NS Toolbar. And you see I'm using Objective-C here. With that thing specifically, there were some bugs with Swift, but if you import it in your bridging headers, everything will be fine, and I'm sure that they eventually fix this up. So to build a toolbar, you have NS Toolbar, you have NS Toolbar item, and you have NS Toolbar item groups. It's quite a straightforward API. And it's quite easy to build your own toolbar. Now, if you look at this toolbar, can anyone guess which item is actually not possible to do in Catalyst without some hacks? Yes, I heard search. So you would think that search is important, and almost every Mac app has a search control, but Apple didn't really get around to doing that. So I'll show you today how you can do this. And the problem really is that there is no search toolbar item. The search works, you create a regular toolbar item, and then you set the view to an NS search field, and that does all the magic to make it look like a toolbar item. And the problem for Apple was that they can't expose NS view. So while you get some of AppKit, you don't get those two view systems, they don't work together. So you have to be a little creative to actually get that to work. And I spoke to the engineers at DubDub 2019, and they told me that search will come in a later release. But Catalina is out now, so nobody knows when that data release will be. And my guess is that it's probably next year with the next operating system that we actually get a native search bar. And of course, I was curious and looked a little bit more under the hood. And there is a UI NS search field toolbar item in a private helper framework. So it seems like they tried and they worked on something, but they just didn't manage to finish it on time. That's life, that sometimes happens. So we can do what we do and just work around it. But you have to consider some other things as well that you might not think of when you port your app in the first place. So one of the things is the macOS cursor is actually fairly responsible. Like on iOS, you don't have that. You just have your finger or the pencil. But here, as you move around, like as you move over a link, over text, the cursor changes and is very responsive. And you don't get that for free. In fact, you don't get it at all. There's no API in Catalyst how you could do this. In AppKit, you have the NSCURSOR API. And while it's really not my favorite API, it gets the job done. But naively, you would try to call NSCURSOR, but it's part of APPKIT, so you can import all of APPKIT, except the parts that Apple allows you to. So this will not compile. However, your app ultimately is an APPKIT app that hosts UIKIT inside. So all of APPKIT is there. So you can fully access everything that's in APPKIT at runtime. So we can fetch the class and then call the method on it dynamically. And it's not pretty, it's not very secure, you don't have compiler support, but it works. But that's not nice. Wouldn't it be nice if we could get compiler support for that? And this is where APPKIT bundles come in. So it turns out that you can create a new target in your UIKIT app that is an APPKIT bundle where you can write APPKIT code. And then you create an interface that can communicate with your UIKIT app. You load that bundle at runtime, and then you communicate with that code. Now, this is exactly what we're going to do. Here's how this looks on the system. So you really see that you have your main binary, and then you have a bundle. And when you dig deep enough, you see another binary. And this is, I wrote it in Objective-C because it makes some of the hacking a little bit easier, but you can equally well do this in Swift. Now, loading bundles is something that has been there since the dawn of macOS. It's there for a very long time, and it's also quite straightforward. However, calling alloc init on a class doesn't really work in Swift. So you need a small Objective-C helper class. Here it's called APPKIT bundle loader. And that gets the job done. And eventually you have an interface that you can call, and then you have all of your APPKIT code in a nice way. Ultimately, here you have a property cursor mode, and you can use that from UIKIT, and you don't have to use all those runtime hacks that I showed you before. Now remember, we talked about search. I made a little bit of a simple example, but now we're going back to search itself. And this is basically, it works the very same way. You create a search bar in APPKIT, and then you send it up to UIKIT. And in order to keep things simple, we use a block that changes and is called whenever you type something in the search bar. And then you react to changes and show however you want to sort the search. There's a few things that we can do to make this even nicer, but I wanted to keep it raw to make it easy to understand. The message here is, whenever you feel like there's something not available in UIKIT, you can reach out to APPKIT and edit. Everything works with the exception of mixing UI views and NS views directly. Now, APPKIT also has a menu bar. And here, Apple actually did spend significant time on porting the API over. We actually get a nicer API in UIKIT than we have in APPKIT. And you can build the whole top menu bar in UIKIT. There's a new API. You already know UIKit command. This is existing API, but now we have UIMENUBUILDER and UIMENUSYSTEM. And this is some sample code how you can build a menu. There's also a very nice example now from Apple that shows you exactly how you do the menu bar. Back when I needed it, it wasn't there yet, but you figure things out. And this is how it looks. It's just like you expect. It's quite straightforward. It does use the first, the responder chain. So it's kind of like UIMENUITEM, if you ever use that. So it will bubble up and look for the selector. So you have to use @Objective-C in Swift, otherwise it will not work. If the selector is found, menu works. If the selector is not found in your tree, then the menu is automatically disabled. It's a little bit weird if you never worked with it, but once you get it, it's actually a very elegant system. Now, very late in importing PDF Viewer to the Mac, we figured out that one thing is missing, and that's the Open Recent menu. We are a menu-based app. You can show PDF, and it's something that's very expected that you can open files from the File menu, and you also want Open Recent menu. The bad news, there is no built-in support for Open Recent. And yes, I filed a radar. The good news, we can do this ourselves, and I'm going to walk you through that now. So we have a few challenges to actually get a good open recent menu that will look just like the open recent menu from any other app. Number one, we have to know how to create arbitrary menu items. We already know that. Number two, we have to figure out a way how to dynamically reload that. Very easy, there's an API on UIMENUSYSTEM. Number three, we have to add images to MenuSystem. Now, this was broken for a very long time, but they fixed it in beta 9, like the very last beta before the launch, so that works too. Number four, we have to get actually a file icon from the system. We could be cheap and just embed the PDF icon, but on macOS, you can change icons from your file types, and it would be weird if the user changes the icon and then you show the default icon. That would look like a bug. So we need to fetch that from the system. And then a little bit annoying, there's sandboxing. So we have to deal with security scope bookmarks. So first of all, we have to build the menu system. That's easy. I've already showed you how to build a menu. And whenever we want to change it, we call set needs rebuild, and the system will create a system again and will update the menu. That part's easy. Next up, we want file type icons. Now, I've been around on iOS for a very long time, and there's a very old trick where you can fetch file system icons, even on iOS, with UI document interaction controller. I was like, oh, this is easy. I did this many years ago. There's API. You look at the header, you see this is available since iOS 3.2, basically forever. This will work. So you call it on Catalyst. And of course, it doesn't work, because it's a version 1 product, and there are a few holes. Apple could just make it declare that it's not available. Instead, you crash at runtime, because that's more fun. So in a way, Catalyst has still a few holes that Apple is going to fix. But that's not the end. Whenever something doesn't work from UIKIT, we can get it from APPKIT. And of course, there's a very nice and very simple API in APPKIT to get those icons, and it's called NSWorkspace. So if you want our image for cookie.pdf, we can go to the dark side and get the image. Now, careful. Remember, we are in APPKIT land, so you get an NS image, which we cannot actually transfer over. But the common denominator is CGImageRef, the core foundation type. You can pass it upwards and then initialize that within your image. Or you could also convert it to a PNG. There's a few ways. So we solved that part as well. The next part, the next problem we have, is accessing security scoped bookmarks. So who actually knows what security scoped bookmarks are? Who had to do this pain? OK, very few people. So remember, we are in a sandbox. So by default, you can only access the files that are in your app bundle. That's not really what we want. We want to open files from anywhere in the system, and Apple's file picker will allow you to do that. So you get an NSURL back, but it's a special NSURL object that includes information that makes it possible for you to actually load that file. Now, we want to implement an open recent menu, so we have to save those NSURLs. But next time we would start our app, we don't have the permission anymore, so it would just error. So we have to use security scoped bookmarks, specifically this API, to save this information as well. So next time we start our app, we can load this and tell the system that, yes, we actually have this permission. Look at this additional data. Now, there's a few steps. And if you don't know all of these steps, it will not work. The first one is like there's an entitlement. I forgot the entitlement, and it took me a very long time to figure out why it didn't work, because you just get a generic error. So remember, entitlement. Then you have to pass in options that actually tell the system that you want the security scope. And then, before you use the URL, you have to say, start access it and stop to access it. And there's also a very evil warning. If you forget that, there are kernel leaks or like bad things happen. So be careful with that code. Now, there's a slight problem. So you have this nice system and these nice headers, but they are marked unavailable for iOS. And while you're writing a Mac app, you're still in UIKIT land, so you're still in iOS land in some way, so you actually can't use this API. Now, what do we do if we are in that situation? We force it. So this is quite easy in Objective-C because you really just can do a define and override the enumeration with the actual value of the enumeration. If you're in Swift, you have to do it a little more elaborate with like raw and initialize, but it works pretty much the same, just a little uglier. But it's doable, it works, and this was actually recommended by an Apple engineer, so while it seems crazy, this currently is the official option to do things. And there's a radar, they'll fix it. So let's recap what challenges we had. We had to create the menu item. Yes, we know how to reload it. We know how to add images. We get the file icon from the system, and we get the security SOAP bookmark. So, a lot of work for this. And then you think like, Catalyst, you're really not helpful. Like, the big difference here is that AppKit apps get all of this for free. So can we do better? And the answer is yes. In AppKit, there is a class called NSDOCUMENTCONTROLLER, and that's exactly what we need. There is a method to register a new document. There is a method to clear them. There is a property to query the recents. And AppKit also automatically adds the open recent menu for you. So it does everything. We want that. And we already know how to do that with our AppKit bridge. But how can we tell AppKit to populate the menu for us? Especially because this menu is controlled by UIKIT. So for this, we have to channel our force a little bit, and let's see what we can do. So this is a little gnarly. This took me a lot of Googling, because there's literally nothing. Eventually, I found one blog post from 2007 by Jeff Johnson, who was talking about his quest to create a menu without interface builder. And usually, you always make the menu with interface builder, so this is really a fringe topic. And eventually, he gets to the opened recent menu and posts this very important snippet here where it calls set menu name NS recent documents menu. And now you have to understand this is private API. So you need to decide for yourself if you want to ship this or not. But on the other hand, this is exactly the code that Interface Builder generates for you when you create an AppKit app. So chances of this changing are extremely slim. It will basically break every app out there. So let's go back to UIKIT. We're not quite done yet. Remember the menu code that we had. There is new file, and then we add an open recent menu. And then we somehow call into the bridge. In that way, I use a dispatch queue and tell the bridge to call this special identifier to make it this smart open recent menu. And I know I'm using dispatch main async, and it's not a good solution. In that case, there's no other way, because as we define the menu, it's not actually there yet. So we need to give the system a little bit of time to actually convert it into the AppKit calls, and then we call our code. And because this is only called at startup, you don't notice it. In that case, it's not a problem, but this is not the solution for everything. So once we are in AppKit land, we use the regular AppKit API to fetch the menu. And you could hardcode it, but it's better to be dynamic. So we search for open recent, and then we call our magical string to make it the recent document menu. And in some other ways, to like translate it into Argentinian language, UIKIT would be your Coke. And it's good, it's fine, but sometimes you would just want to have something better. So you add a little bit of Fernet to it, which is AppKit. And then the combination is what makes it special. No. Don't clap. Look at it. It's actually not working. But we did everything right, didn't we? Everything. And to give you some context, I wrote this in one day. We actually were on a company retreat in Barcelona. And I was at this stage, and it was already way late at night. And I really wanted this to work. So you could scream, you could blame others, you could give up, or you just keep digging. Guess what I did? So what you do when you're desperate, you load AppKit, and you load the disassembled version of AppKit. So here's like this 100 megabyte file. It really takes a while to load. And then I searched for this string, this NS recent document menu string that you already saw, because I was curious, like, where is it actually used? So you find it, you scroll up until you actually find the very function where it's referenced. And the function is called hint, 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 install open recent menu. This seems useful. By the way, so this is the output from either Pro from Hexrace. It really can create a large C file with the whole decompilation. But you can also use Hopper, which is like a more Mac-like tool, a little nicer interface, a little less powerful, but much more affordable. So now we know the final bit that's missing. And here I'm using key value coding to call our magical install open recent menu. You know, at this point, we're already using private API, so why not use a little bit more? And if you do this, please always be careful. I'm in Objective-C land because in the non-demonstration code, everything is in a big try-catch because you want to write defensive code. If that method is no longer there because we use key value coding, it will create an NS exception. It will not crash your app if you do it right. You can capture the exception and then log something, and then in the very worst case, the open recent menu doesn't work, but doesn't completely break your app. So whenever you do something smart or hacky, be careful about it and think about if macOS evolves, will this still work or will this explode? You could also do this in Swift, but then you might want to wrap this part into an Objective-C helper that actually catches the exception because you can't do that in Swift directly. You could convert it to an error. You could still react to it. There's many ways how you can deal with this. This is just one that's very convenient for me. And now, final step. We have the open recent menu. Now you can clap. And you know what's the best part? Everything I showed you before, like us getting the image, dealing with this NS secure bookmark thingy, AppKit does all of that for you. So once I had this, I was able to delete a lot of code. And ultimately, I think this is the better solution. Now, there was one more thing. This was a little bit concerning. And I was worried, like, would I get through review? And I'm actually not worried about private API, because if you're smart about it, this is not the problem. But the actual AppKit bundle, that actual approach was unknown if Apple would allow that. Like, a few people did it. But I opened the radar, I talked to people. Nobody could tell me if this is actually allowed or if you have to do it a different way. But ultimately, our app got approved. So I guess even though the radar is still unanswered, this is an approved method, at least for now. And if it would ever not be allowed, you can still do all of that at runtime in UIKIT. It's just a little more ugly. So we took the risk, and we shipped it, and it passed review. And yeah, compile time checked code is nice, don't you agree? So let's recap what we learned today. We learned about the history of Mac Catalyst. We learned about the use cases and platform adoption. It will take a while. We learned a little bit what makes a good Mac app, even though really this could be its own talk. We learned how to create toolbars and search fields. We learned about AppKit bundles, about NSCURSOR. We learned about security scope bookmarks, my favorite topic. And we learned about the amazing NSDOCUMENTCONTROLLER. And yeah, if you want to ship a great Mac app with Catalyst, you will have to use some AppKit. This is the way. So thank you very much for my talk. For more hack stories, you can follow me on Twitter. I post quite a bit about Catalyst and other things. And you can also try out PDF Viewer for the Mac. I'm not yet proud, but we're slowly getting there. And I'll be around for questions.
Yeah, we'll have to push the questions for later because we're running out of time. But you can find Peter later or tomorrow during the conference for questions. So thank you very much again.